or this
Yep.
is just podcast? YouTube
Yep.
and podcast.
YouTube. Yep. All right. What is going on, everybody? I hope you're having a great day today. This is Alex from the Fresh Fantasy Podcast, and this is the 5th episode of Season 3. Today, we're going to be talking about some DFS game theory. Daily fantasy sports are only growing, and today's episode is about some of the best strategy and things to look for when playing DFS. But I am no DFS guru. But today, we are lucky enough to be joined by someone who is a DFS superstar at Team Rise or Fall. He is as talented as he is handsome, with over 8,000 followers on Twitter. He is DFSnDonuts himself. Mitch Carl, welcome to the show, Mitch.
I feel like my wife wrote the intro for you, Alex. There's no way you think of that.
That's what all the comments are saying in the Discord and everything like that. I feel like people are always saying that. But as we know, I mean, you are DFSnDonuts yourself, but how did you get into this? We talked a little bit before the show about how you were a teacher before. So like what led to this career change, and how long have you been done teaching since you started this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love to talk about myself, to be honest. No, I'm just playing. I started in 2017, and to be honest, very similar to how you've begun. I just had an ultimate passion for, as you have for fantasy football, I had for DFS. And in 2016, I was writing emails to all my friends. I'm like, hey guys, you got to check this out. I've kind of figured out the code. I cracked the code. And I sent out emails, and someone was like, hey, you should try like starting a blog. I had no clue how to do it, but I found a site called RotoGrinders, and they had a blog program. So I started writing free articles on their blog program, won a couple of awards, and I leveraged that into writing articles for other companies around the industry. Figured somewhere along the way, I needed to do something different. So I started doing streaming and podcasts out of my car. I just kind of went through, every step, up to launching my own businesses. And it's been a very long road, a lot of late hours, but ultimately it was fueled by a complete desire to do something different with my life. I was teaching full-time elementary school, and I enjoyed it, but it was taxing and tiring, and I needed something different. And once I had kids, I realized that my time and energy were being devoted too much to my job and not so much for them. And I wanted to be able to be home and doing, full-time dad house life, to be honest. And when the pandemic came around, I just kind of said, you know what, my germophobia aside, I don't know if I can continue to do this in this capacity. So I hit the eject button on teaching and launched a couple companies, and here we are. So
that's so awesome. Well, congratulations on all your success
Appreciate
and
it.
everything like that. But you also mentioned that when you were sending those emails out a few years ago to your friends, and you said you cracked the code. So what exactly is that code? Like, do you have a database or projection system that you use to make picks at this point?
Yeah. So luckily, I've met tremendous people along the way who are much smarter than me, Alex. Honestly, I'm not this like wizard back here with all sorts of data that can manipulate things on his own. I have great friends that are able to do this, and I brought them on board at Team Rise or Fall, and I said, hey, can you put your projection system on the site? And then, we talk about it, aside from business and company matters of how we can tweak things and make things easier for people to use. But honestly, man, it's not like I'm sitting here and I've cracked the code on my own, and I don't even think I've cracked the code. I mean, I was just joking around, to be honest.
Of course.
DFS every single day, man. I think what makes it so fun is it's unique, and I think being able to adjust to an ever-shifting landscape of what DFS is has helped me be more successful than what I was when I began thinking that I had cracked the code through those emails, and realizing that I hadn't, and I continue to try to better my game. I study a lot of winning trends. I study a lot of what other professional DFS players are doing, and I learn a lot through their wins and losses.
Interesting. So you said that you study some of the big players and what they're doing. Like, is there a way that their bets are tracked that you study? Like what do you mean by when you study those guys, like the other people that you look up to?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my site, Team Rise or Fall, is partnered with another site called FanCruncher. FanCruncher has this software that allows you to line up study other pros. So I'll go in there, and I've got about a dozen people or so I've been tracking for the last 3 years. And every single day, every single week for NFL, I'm looking at how did they play? How many players did they use in their player pool? What kind of stacks were they running out? What type of correlation did they have? What did they do with these highly owned quarterback stacks? And, did they leverage this situation? And I've just been kind of tracking that over the years. I've got a massive Excel file where I've got all my research of everything I've done. My research is on other players more so than on the sport itself. And I feel like I've learned a lot through doing that over sitting here and trying to become the best player I can through stacks and projections. Just studying what, really successful people are doing wrong and correctly has allowed me to adjust my own game.
I love that. I love that. So when you say that you're looking at their games and exactly, how they play. So are you more paying attention to exactly what they're doing, the trends and the numbers, rather than actually what's happening on the field? Like, is that an edge that you have?
I tell you what, I've had this. I've posted this on Twitter before too. Because I'm playing NBA, MLB, NFL. Sometimes I'm dabbling in PGA, NASCAR, these other sports. I think there's a part of me that wants to believe that watching the actual sports is super helpful when it comes to DFS. The larger part of me says that's irrelevant. You don't have to be a student of the game. You don't have to, be grinding film, as you see the comments out there sometimes. I honestly think DFS is a puzzle. And I think as soon as I embrace the fact that I don't need to know, a one-on-one matchup information and, watch somebody on the field and have my eyes tell me this person's going to excel in the future, because that's all in the data. And if I'm just sitting here studying data like a geek, honestly, I'm nerding out and staring at data for, probably 30, 40 hours per week before the NFL slate. I'm trying to identify those things. And, it's kind of like the Matrix, right? It's all ones and zeros. It's binary code. And you see the same information that people are seeing with their eyes saying, oh, hey, this guy's about to break out. Look at his average depth of target, right? It's like they saw that he was getting targeted down the field. I saw in his ADOT average that he's getting targeted down the field. So I feel like the information people identify on the field while they're watching, you can do it in the numbers too.
That makes sense. Let's backtrack just a little bit here, because I think that, like, personally, I'm someone that's new to DFS, and like part of me is like, okay, like, how am I ever going to get to this level? So like, I would assume that in your time playing DFS in the last year or two, you've dabbled in other sports for the first time. And so there are probably people that are listening to this podcast that are interested in DFS but have never played. So what is your process like, and what are the things that you look for when you first start a new DFS sport? You're new to it. You're not like a seasoned veteran like you are at NFL and NBA. Like, what is your process like when you first start a new DFS sport?
Yeah, first thing I want to do is try to identify what are the rule discrepancies between the sites and see if there's one that I want to play on more than the other. So if I've identified, site A has these rule settings and they're very similar to something I've done before or something I feel more comfortable with, I'm going to dive in on that site. The next thing I want to do is identify my goals. So what is my goal with playing this sport? Do I want to be a cash game player? Do I want to play tournaments? Do I want to try to become, an MME superstar and throw out dozens and dozens of lineups every slate? I think first thing you need to do is just identify your goals and then track them. I think a lot of people make a lot of mistakes in DFS by not tracking, and gambling too. Sports betting as well. You need to track everything. And if you're not tracking it, how are you highlighting? How are you able to highlight what you've done right or wrong from week to week? And once you start to track all that, again, going back to the nerd stuff, once you have it all tracked, you're able to identify, the ebb and flow of your own success. And if there's something specific you've done each and every week, when you're able to look back at all of your data and look at what your process was, maybe you can say to yourself, oh, wow, look at this. Every single time I've done 4-player stacks in my single entry, 6 out of the 8 weeks, I've made it to the cash line, or I've placed the top 10%. But without tracking, how do you know?
Yep. Interesting. Okay, that makes so tracking everything is huge for everything, for looking for trends. And so you think that's one of the biggest things, being able to track? Is some people probably don't want to track. They know it's not good, so they don't want to see all the losses piling up on their spreadsheet. So when you track though, do you right? It's hard because I know you do so much DFS and player props and everything like that every day. But do you write down at all just the logic of what you were thinking? Like how do you when you track it and you look back on it? Do you analyze it by writing down your logic of why you made the pick before, or is it something you kind of keep track of in your head, or is it something that the data tells you? I know it's a long-winded question.
No, honestly, I was just thinking while you're asking this, I'm like, man, he's a fantastic host. These are great questions you're asking. I actually, back in the day, I had a notebook, and I used to fill up notebooks all the time, old school, just on pen and paper. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm doing. I have a quick thought, write it down, go study it later. Now, I've got YouTube channels, I have Twitch streams, I've got podcasts, and I'm able to go back and just rewatch it. So like Saturday night before the NFL season, I'll go back and I'll look at, I'll go back. I've had sickness in our house for like 10 days. I'm pounding coffee and just making sure I don't cough on stream here today. But, I'll go back, and Saturday nights before I do my lineup building, I review what I talked about for the week, and I'm watching quickly on like 2x speed on YouTube, and I'm trying to see what were my lineup study streams like, what did I talk about, what were my goals for the weekend, and then I build my lineup. So I'm able to kind of backtrack it now. But, if you don't have the ability to do something like that, I mean, just jotting down some notes about what your goals are for that weekend, what your goals are for the main slate. If you're doing a showdown Sunday night slate, whatever it is, I think just writing it down. You got to have something down on paper, something down on Word document, Excel sheet, whatever it is for you that allows you to organize your thoughts and your goals, I think is so crucial. And I've mentioned this in multiple questions, tracking and writing things down. It is such a critical element of my process in virtually everything I do, whether it's sports betting, whether it's prize picks, whether it's player props, whether it's DFS, single entry, cash games, MME, I'm writing everything down, or I'm cataloging it somehow.
And you think, and like you said, that definitely creates a big edge with everything that you're doing when you're writing that stuff down. So when you write it down with all these different sites, like, do you write down on notebooks for certain sites? Do you track things on Excel? Like, what are like the biggest what are the, like, if someone's just starting, okay, you know what, Mitch, like I'm going to start tracking my bets today. Like, would you start like to track things? And like, do you manually put them all in, or do you have something now, some fancy thing that it tracks it for you? Like, how does that go?
Yeah, there are products out there. You can quick Google search. You can find things that would track your DFS success and failure. Same with bets. I do it through Excel. I'm not some Excel wizard either. It's not like I have some like special formatting. But honestly, I just go in there and I type up, here's what I did in the single entry. Here were the results, and for betting, here was my prop pick. Here were the odds. Here was my investment. Here's the return, win or loss. And I just designate everything in its own columns, and I track it through Excel. But it's not like I have some special sauce that I could give out here. Just track it whatever way you can. If Excel's not your thing, which is not for a lot of people, and it wasn't for me for years either, do it on a notebook. Do it anywhere you can. Just make sure you do. That's so important to make sure that you're able to go back and say, hey, weeks 2 through 5, I was doing this and I was really successful. You've had 2 bad weeks. Go back and look and be like, oh my gosh, I got away from doing, A, B, and C over the last 2 weeks. I didn't even realize it, but you're able to realize it because you had it written down.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and that interesting. That is, I'm learning a lot here, especially as someone that's newer to DFS. That there's a lot to learn here. But I think one of the biggest takeaways is so interesting is, like you said, how much you can go just by looking at trends, looking back at your own thing. Like, I mean, I'm a psychopath. Like, I couldn't just not watch the games, but I know there's people out there that are also super successful with this. They like don't even watch games. They just look at data, they make their bets, and that is that. But that's really interesting. That's another thing is like, I just have to ask as a side question, like, do you still watch a lot of the games that I know you can't watch everything with how many bets are down, but are you like watching games every day? I know that's tough when you got a wife and kids though.
Yeah, I do my best. I mean, I got Red Zone up on Sunday afternoons, and that's easy. And the kids understand that we're watching some football on Sunday afternoons. And, I get all my dad activities in on Saturday as much as I can, Sunday before I jump on my live stream. And then, as the games are kind of winding down in the afternoon, I'll switch it up and start doing more dad stuff. But the kids watch with me. I mean, we're playing football in the family room while we're watching and stuff too. So we find ways to do it. And then, I watch it. But here's the thing, circling back to a question you asked earlier, I watch it as a hobby. I'm not watching it to like grind film or figure out anything I need to know for the next week. There's so many people out there, you included, who give out such good information that I'll know about Kadarius Toney and how he did and what he looked like, and what his ADOT was for the week, and is he being targeted down the field, and how's Daniel Jones look under pressure, and next week he's facing a team that blitzes 37% of the time. Daniel Jones has been really poor under pressure this season, blah blah blah. It's like that's going to be identified for me. I don't need to watch the Giants game to figure that out. So I have trusted sources, you, others, football guys. I love them. There's a lot of people out there where I'm able to read up on these games and look for the actual analysis in the write-ups and their videos and the podcast, things like that. And then, the data and the projections on my site. So I watch games just for hobby and for fun. So, and all sports, NBA. I mean, I'm watching the playoffs right now, and it's not to be a better sports bettor. It's because I love watching the NBA playoffs. I can't wait for the Bulls-Bucks game in a couple hours here.
Yep, absolutely. I know that's gonna be a good one. I'm pulling for the Bulls. I'm pulling for my namesake lookalike, Alex Caruso.
That's right, baby.
So I'm pulling for them. And again, I'd love to see them play the Celtics second round. Personally, I'm from Boston, so I'm pulling for my guys. But
a lot invested, man.
Absolutely, all the best. But another thing that you mentioned is and I've heard other big time fantasy players say this, and it sounds like you're saying something similar with how you do DFS. Like everything's a data point. You know what I mean? Like you don't just use projections. You don't just use, what Alex told you or what something else told you. Like every single piece of information you get with tracking, how you look at sites are all data points and how that goes. But what do you think that for the viewers and the people that are listening and people like me that are still new to DFS, what would be the biggest 2 or 3 things that you could take away? Because there's so many different things that you can do, but starting out, tracking seems like it's one of them. But what are the biggest 2 or 3 things you think that both give you an edge and that are good things to start with?
That's a fantastic question. I think certainly tracking would be the first thing. Set up some type of way that you can track what you're doing and what the results were. And I think you do that each and every week. The next thing I'd want to do is identify my goals. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but without having any clue of what your goal is, how can you build a competitive lineup? I think you need to know what your plan is going into each week before you start to build that lineup. I think a lot of people make a huge mistake by building the lineup and then entering contests. And I did that in the beginning as well. I'd build this lineup, be like, oh man, I love this lineup. What do you love it for? A large field tournament, a small field tournament with only a couple hundred entries? Do you love it for a 10-person league? Do you love it for cash games? So I think identifying, hey, I want to build the most competitive lineup I can for the $10 blitz or whatever it might be called on FanDuel. And it's a single entry. Nobody can enter more than one contest. And that's your goal. So your goal is to build a super competitive $10 lineup for that specific contest with that specific amount of people in it. Okay, well, now that that's my goal, I know what I need to try to accomplish for the week. Well, okay, in that contest, what type of lineup do I want to build? Well, maybe I want to build a 4-person game stack because you're against 1,500 people. So you need a little bit more correlation if you're trying to climb to the top of the mountain against 1,499 other lineups. And maybe you entered a contest that only had 200 people. Well, you might not need that much correlation. So maybe you're doing a 3-person game stack, or maybe you're just doing a team stack. So what I'm trying to get at is that by identifying your goal and realizing that lineups should be built for the contest you're entering and not being built and then just haphazardly entering any contest, I think that's crucial. A lot of people will build a lineup and say, oh man, $7, $200,000 up top, contest, and they'll build this lineup. And it's a lineup that doesn't have a good chance of winning a contest like that because it doesn't have the proper correlation. Maybe you don't have the correct type of leverage you need for a very, very large tournament with 200,000 entries. So building for the contest you are entering your lineup in, I think, is more important than building a good lineup and then entering the contest.
Okay. And so just for clarification, I want to touch on the lineup building, but when you talk about the goals that you have, goals is in terms of the type of contest that you want to win. It's not it's not like my goal today is to be profitable or my goal today is to win. Is you mean goals by identifying exactly what type of contest you're going to play and then going from there of how you're going to win that type of contest before choosing the type of players that you're actually going to pick in your lineups. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's spot on. That's good clarification. Okay. Yeah, I think you need to identify, what the contest is first. Okay. Number one, what the size of the contest is, and then realizing that certain types of builds and correlations for those size of contests are how you need to build your lineup. And then you decide who's going to be in the lineup. But everything else comes before the people themselves.
Okay, and another thing before we get into lineup building, when you're looking at these contests, how do you identify which contests you want to play in? Because I know, do you look at the the management fees, which is like how much, you know, a site takes like out of the pot? Like, so all the entries, like if they always take a certain percentage, like, do you look at management fees? Do you look at the number of people? Does it depend on the week with the players? Like, how do you, like, when you start going through your process before you build your lineups, obviously, like, what are the biggest things you look for when actually choosing the type of contest you feel like you'll have an edge in on the given week?
Yeah, so I still do. Listen, I'll have weekends where I'll have thousands of dollars in play, and I'm still looking for the same exact thing that I looked for when I first began. So that's how important this is to me. When I'm building into lineups, I'm not chasing the $100,000 lineup. I don't. I mean, even I had a very successful last couple of years playing DFS, and it was basically through grinding smaller contests. So I think when you are building your lineups and entering your certain types of contests, try to focus on contests where first place prize is no more than, like, I'd say about 15% to first place. Meaning if there is $100,000 in the tournament for prize money, you'd want no more than $10,000 to $15,000 going to first place. And then if you're looking at the next 9 spots, so in your top 10 spots, you're hoping for no more than like 20 to 25%. Now, every once in a while, you'll find a really good tournament structure and it's ideal. And these are the contests I enter: 10% to first place, 20 to 25% to top 10, and then up to 25% of the entire field of entries gets 2 times their return on their investment. Meaning if there's 100,000 people in the tournament, 25,000 people would cash out 2 times whatever the buy-in was. $10 buy-in means 25,000 people would return $20.
Okay.
That's a perfect contest structure.
Okay. So something like that. So like where there's like 25% of the top 10 and then 25% of the field, will win money, usually double their return. Those are like the dream contests. What about, like, do you look at all, like, with the, you kind of just said it, but do you look at the management fees and like how much the site will take out of the contest before, and like a percentage wise? Because I know some will give like even more money than is even in the contest. Like I know Yahoo does one every week, like the 40,000 people, and their management fees minus 25%. So they throw in a lot of extra money. Like, do you pay attention to that stuff at all?
So, tongue in cheek here, I have a lot of money in play. I pay attention to it.
Okay.
If you're beginning and you got 5, 10, 25 bucks in there and you're just trying to get out a good lineup, it's not a big deal. I mean, we're talking a couple percentage points, on 10 bucks. What is that for you? It's like 20 cents. So I don't think that's as important. I think paying attention to the payout structure is the most important thing when you're first starting out and you're trying to build your bankroll.
Okay. And then with that, like, I had asked someone else that's pretty good at DFS, but doesn't like do DFS professionally like you do. And what this person had said to me is that when you're doing like lineups and stuff like that, and you want to put money in, is it better to do like, and this is a tough question here, and I know you could go, it's a little tongue in cheek, like you mentioned, when you're building lineups, like, is it better to, like, if I'm going to put in like $150 to DFS that week in certain, like, if I have a good tournament structure, however I want, I'll have a good tournament structure. Is it better to just have more lineups total in a smaller contest, like $2 or $3 entries, because you have more leverage over the bigger contest where you just might have one entry for like $100? Does that make sense? Like, is that important to you that you have more like leverage over the field with a certain number of lineups? I can clarify that question. I know it's a little confusing.
No, that's good. So I think it's more important. Like, let's say I had $100 for the weekend.
Sure.
I think it's much more important to pay attention to the size of the contest, more so than how many entries you want to do, or if you want to, be chasing a large money payout or anything like that. Like if you're just starting out, you're trying to build your bankroll. There's a $12 contest for 49 entrants. Like that might only have a $150 payout for first place, but you only have to beat 48 lineups to get that $150 payout. You have a much higher probability of doing that if you have good correlation. You just happen to have a good lineup versus that lineup, the same exact lineup. But this is something I show on my weekly streams during the season. You could take that same lineup with the same score and compare it to another $12 contest that has 1,200 people in it. And the 1,200 person contest might return $40, and the same score in the 49 person contest returned first place for 150. So I think paying attention to the contest size is honestly the very first thing you're doing. And the smaller contests, they usually have the type of payout you want that I had mentioned earlier, where you'll get 10 to 15% the first place and 25% of all entrants will get paid out. They're set up that way and they go quick and get filled up very fast because they're the best contests. And then after that, I think a lot of people, they sink money into these large contests. So I would say if you're just starting out, probably single entry is the way to go. I think, getting into MME is the way to go once you feel established in what you need to do and how to build lineups. I think having more lineups in play is better, but not if you don't know what you're doing yet. If you're not prepared to build competitive lineups, well, then you're haphazardly throwing out, suboptimal lineups for the contest you're entering. And you just have a lot of extra lineups going in there and you're losing money on them.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So would you say on that, if you don't know what you're doing, it's probably best to avoid your milli makers and your 100,000 plus lineups. So you would say that, like, people, I mean, I know a lot of people just do it for fun and they're not worried about being profitable. They just like to, let's hope I get the $1 million if every guy scores their touchdown. So do you think that it is a mistake for people that want to be profitable, that they get too fixated on like what the big prize could be and how many times they could, duplicate their money if they happen to win the $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're just trying to have some fun, again, throw your dart out there and just have a good time, right? I mean, you and I could be talking about the Millie Maker, doing Millie Maker challenge for the season and just see who can return the most money on each week. Stuff like that is super fun to do. And I think for generally playing DFS, a lot of us should be playing it just to have fun. I don't think people should be approaching it to be, this is going to be my side income. I don't think that is an ideal goal to have, unless you've been doing this for a while or you've picked up a really good process and you've had success. I think you can. I think a lot of people can do very well having side income in DFS, but you got to take it a little bit more serious as far as chasing the big lineups, the big contests. I think you nailed it, man. It's hobby. It's a hobby thing. It's for fun with friends, fun with family, bragging rights with your buddies, things like that. I think is ideal to keep in mind when you're putting together your lineups. If you're playing a small contest, I think you're in my pool, right? You're trying to build a bankroll. You're trying to win some money, and you're not too concerned about having that huge win posted on your fridge for your mom or your wife or your husband, whatever it might be. You're not chasing the glory. You're just like, hey, here's, I got like 5 times a return this week, and let's go. So it's just identify your goals and go from there.
Sure. And then so wait, that's in regards to the contest, but the actual like lineup building itself, do you have any we'll start out generally and we'll work our way a little bit deeper, but like generally when you're building a lineup, like do you have, and again it's so tough because it changes from contest to contest, it probably changes from site to site and different things that you look for, but do you have any, because like again, like the people that are probably listening to, I mean, these kind of podcasts are not like the most hardcore DFS players in the world. So like, what are the biggest like general lineup building tips that you can give to someone that like has never even thought about lineup building before and how critical that is, like myself?
Oh, that's fine, man. That's a great question. I think that was a good phrasing too, because it's helpful for me. I spend so much time in my Discord and on my streams talking to other people who are like true DFS grinders. So I'll get deep into the weeds before I talk about what's there on the surface. And I know I should do that more so. So thanks for kind of pulling the reins back. And I need it, man. You give me these questions, I'm like, I'm ready to go. Let's talk DFS.
Absolutely.
I think correlation is number one. The first thing you want to do is put together correlation. Doesn't matter the sport. I think most sports, correlation is important. The only one that doesn't matter is NBA. Correlation means if you have a quarterback who throws a touchdown, you want the touchdown to go to your receiver on your lineup as well, right? You've got Tom Brady throwing it to Rob Gronkowski. You get the 4 points for the pass. You get the 6 points for the reception. That's a 10-point touchdown. And then add in the yardage and the reception bonuses you get for there. And that type of correlation means you could have a 12.5, a 16-point swing, just like that, one touchdown. In baseball, it's the same thing. You might have 5 players stacked from one team, meaning you have the first, second, third, 5th and 7th hitters, and your goal is to have multiple runners on base for when the 5th hitter gets up. hits a 3-run home run. Now you're getting, 2 bonus RBIs for knocking in 2 batters. You get the run bonuses because the 2 people on base scored. They got the points because they got on base. There's just the correlation just adds up. So you want more bang for your buck. So I think the very first thing you need to do when you're putting together your lineups is figure out who is going to be your quarterback stack for the week, for that lineup, or for that contest, and then go from there.
Okay, I like that. And then so after you have your correlated lineup, then does it kind of go like contest by contest of maybe certain contests like you need full correlation to win the $1 million because you need Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T Higgins, and then you need the guys on the other side. Do you think that after the correlation, what do you look for contest by contest to make sure that you have the best lineup possible?
Yeah, the larger the contest, the more correlation I want. I want, Tom Brady, when he throws 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, I've got 2 of his wide receivers or tight ends that, are able to rack up those scores. Hopefully it's Gronk and, I had Gronk and Mike Evans and they combined for 4 touchdowns. That lineup right there, I've got maybe 80, 90 points out of those 3 players alone, and the other 6 roster spots on my lineup, I'm already cooking. So if there's anybody else on my team that has good days, I'm probably already in the cash. And now I'm in the hunt to take down a tournament. So if you are playing in, and if we're talking large field tournaments, well, what happened when Tom Brady threw 400 yards and 4 touchdowns? Did the other team throw the ball 50 times to come back? Was Derek Carr peppering Darren Waller with 20 targets in that game? So then Darren Waller is in that stack as well, because you're theorizing Tom Brady's going to go absolutely nuclear today. And then on the other side, the Raiders are going to have to throw the ball 1 million times to come back. So then I want some Raiders pass catchers. Now you got 4 guys in that lineup. They're all in that game. And if that outcome comes to fruition, now you're sitting pretty with half your lineup. So, the larger the contest, the more correlation I'd shoot for. And then the smaller the contest, it's less important. Maybe just a simple Tom Brady to Mike Evans stack would be sufficient for a 49-person contest.
Okay, so the bigger the contest, the more correlation you want across your lineups.
Yep.
So if you are doing the your Millie Makers or your big contests like that, and beyond just for fun, having the dart throws with your favorite players in it, high correlation will be critical for you to be actually getting a big payout in those. But in the smaller contests, your 100-person or less than 50-person, the correlation stuff is not as important, and it's more about creating a good lineup. Is that?
Nailed it, man. You absolutely nailed it. Yeah. The correlation with the larger tournaments, because you have to beat so many lineups. Some of these contests are 200,000 people and, you're trying to beat 199,000 other lineups. How can you do it? Well, do you want to, and let me put it this way. Do you want to invest into 9 different outcomes through a bunch of individual plays? Or do you want to invest in one scenario that has 5 guys from one game that has a 41-38 shootout? There's 24 teams on the 12-game main slate, trying to hope that, 9 different players and 9 different games or whatever all do great is a really tough thing to invest into when you can say, I hope 50% of my lineup's in a shootout. And then maybe even with the rest of your lineup, maybe you're doing, Keenan Allen is against, I don't know, the Saints or something. You've got Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas in the same lineup, and you're saying, I think that game's a shootout as well. So you've got your Tom Brady Raiders stack, and you've got your Keenan Allen, Mike Thomas correlative wide receiver stack, and now you've got 6 or 7 of your 9 players in your lineup are invested in just 2 outcomes. And if those 2 outcomes come to fruition, you've got a legitimate chance to win a tournament at this point.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And going to the contests themselves with cash versus tournaments, what would you as someone who's done this for a long time, and you've probably given a lot of advice to new players as well as your hardcore DFS grinders, do you think that is there one or the other between cash or tournaments that you'd recommend that people get started on when playing DFS?
Yeah, so this has changed a lot for me over the years.
Okay.
It's been about 2 years or so since I've touched the cash game. I think that the edge, to an extent, is waning, maybe even gone in cash games. You'll see a lot of cash game cash lines that are 5-6 points away from what the tournament line was. 3-4 years ago, you'd have a 20-25 point difference between tournaments and cash games.
Okay.
And you're actually starting to see a lot of people in cash games run out mini stacks. They'll have the Tom Brady to Mike Evans stack. They'll have the Derek Carr to Darren Waller stack. So I think the edge in cash games has disappeared enough to where if you're trying to build your bankroll, I think the place to go is probably playing small tournaments, maybe even looking at doing the quintuple ups. And those are where you invest in a $2 entry. And if it hits in the cash line, you get 5 times your return. So your $2 turns into 10. So, if you're Mitch, I've only got $10 a weekend. Okay, you do $5 into a very small tournament, 115 entrants on FanDuel, and then you take the $2 quintuples, you throw it into a couple of those. Listen, if you cash out in your tournament, that 5 might be a $12 return, and your quintuple ups return you another 20. So your $9 was $32 return on the weekend, and that's pretty good profit in just 1 week. Think about it this way: if you invested 9 but you returned 32, now you're playing with just about $25 in house money. That's 3 free weeks of DFS you just covered yourself in if you stay at that $9 buy-in. You can totally brick your next 3 weeks and basically break even. So I think, then the next thing you would do is manage your money and just understand that just because you won doesn't mean you're going to win all the time. And don't start investing more each and every week because you're going to give it back. I mean, I've seen the best players do it. Stick to what your comfort level is with your buy-ins and understand every single week you play DFS, whatever you invest, you could lose it all. And if you invest an amount that is going to set you into a tizzy and you are going to be very frustrated or ticked off at the amount you lost, well, then you played too much money. So be smart about it.
Yeah, I wish I could have listened to this podcast like 6 months ago, because and this is why I wanted to have you on to be able to talk about some of this stuff, because 6 months ago I was only playing like the Millie Makers and stuff like that. I'd only have 2 or 3 lineups. I got better at correlation. That was one thing I did figure out, but I was also the person that would I'd have a big win where I'd win a couple $100. The next lineup I was like, okay, I'm onto it now. I understand DFS. So let me start adding more lineups because I get it now. But then all of a sudden, my bankroll would be gone two weeks later almost. So
yeah.
But
I mean, don't knock yourself for it. That's DFS in a nutshell. That's gambling in a nutshell. People think, now I've got it. Here I go. Sell the car, sell the kidney, sell the kids. I'm going all in.
Hey, absolutely. But you feel like you need to sometime after you get a big win and the confidence starts flowing. You just had a good cup of coffee. What else can you do? So I'm totally with you. But another thing that I also wanted to ask about beyond the DFS a little bit as we're, nearing the end here is player props. I mean, player props, something that I'm also, very interested in, and player props, something that I think I can actually do on certain sites because there's no, legal sports gambling. I can't use DFS Sportsbook in Massachusetts. So with player props in general, that, I know this is an abrupt shift, but in player props, what are the biggest things that you look for in player props as well? Is correlation, important in player props? And what are some of the biggest tips and keys that you look for?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're playing a player prop as a standalone prop, you're not trying to put together a single game parlay or anything like that. Correlation is totally irrelevant. The only thing I'm looking at is this a plus EV, an expected value of that? So when I'm looking at this, comparing lines is huge to me. So let's say we were playing, I'm going to just keep using Mike Evans, super simple. Mike Evans, his over under for yardage is 53.5 yards on FanDuel Sportsbook. DraftKings has him at 59.5. And, that MGM has him at 57. If you think he's in for a good day, maybe your projection system has him in for a good day, maybe the over 53.5 is probably the best bet, depending on what the odds are, as long as it's not minus 180 or something silly where you're not going to bet on that. But the 53.5 gives you such a better probability, a higher probability of success. You're taking that. So line shopping in props is huge. I actually had a massive season this year playing NFL player props. I had a couple hundred units won. I didn't expect it. It was my first season going all in on player props. I could finally bet here in Virginia to do it. And I mean, I didn't do anything specific where I could say, hey, listeners, make sure you do X, Y, and Z, other than have a very good projection system on my website. And then just make sure I was playing the lowest possible line on a player where I thought they were hitting the over, and vice versa. I think somebody's going to get locked down by an opposing cornerback or something, or the defense is going to have bracket coverage. Okay, well then what I'm not doing. I'm not taking the under 50 in there 3.5. I'm looking at that 59.5 we saw on DraftKings, and I'm taking the under on that one. And just line shopping around the different sports books, which means you have to have money on multiple books. Was super important. Now, if you have like Prize Picks or Underdog Fantasy, the same thing there. I mean, even now through the NBA playoffs, I'm providing prop picks for my members, and you'll see a line on Prize Picks versus Underdog Fantasy that might be 2 values different on whatever the category is. And if somebody just blindly says, well, I have the Prize Picks app open on my phone, I'm just going to play this one. That's not the best possible EV bet they can make. So just focusing on being plus EV with everything you do, I think over the long term can put you in a good spot to be profitable. Now, if that was like way too advanced, I think just focusing on taking the best lines possible is what you need to do. And I probably could have said that first in 10 seconds and moved on to the next question. But man, when I get behind the mic and you ask me a question, I just run with it.
No problem with that at all. I'm definitely, but just for clarification, I'm just making sure that I'm understanding. So with player props, like, is it as simple as like line shopping and then having a good projection system? So if you're subbing to a site, like a great site like DFSnDonuts or Team Rise or Fall, and they have the best projections in the business, do you use that and then just line shop? And that's a lot of how you build like your single player props?
Yeah, I mean, I line shop just nonstop. I mean, once I've identified a prop, I want to compare the edge over the market. So I've got my projection for Mike Evans. We project him for 62.5 yards receiving. And I've looked at, every metric under the sun, and this is what I agree with. Okay, now the next step is go compare the odds. Go look at all the books. And if the minus, the over 53.5 on FanDuel is a terrible odds, maybe I am going up to the 56.5 or whatever it was on MGM for, minus 115. It might be a less probable outcome that he hits the over on that because the yardage is higher, but the odds are better. So my return will be better. Okay. And that's all I did. That's all I did the entire season. I don't know if that is the magic recipe or the special sauce, but that's what I did and it was successful. So that's what I'm running with.
I love that. And with that being said, like, how many different sites do you look at when you're line shopping?
I mean, my friend, it's hard for a lot of people who are bankroll building or, doing stuff like this and with a smaller bankroll to have money everywhere, but I have money in a lot of places. So I'm looking at 6-7 different books. I will post my bets on my betting website, mysparry.com. I'll post them there for only 3 books. I'll do FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM. But I personally am looking at 6 or 7 different books. Everything. There's so many, legal sports books in my state in Virginia now that I'm able to bet around, and I will ultimately take whatever has the best line, and I'll go there. And I have no loyalty to any one book. My loyalty is to my bankroll, and protecting my bankroll. I don't care about the sports books at all. I want to beat them all. So I'm going wherever I have the best probability of winning.
Oh yeah, 6 to 7. Because when I asked the question and you're like, oh, my friend, we got a lot. I was like, oh man, what does he look at, like 20 different books or something like that for the odds? Okay, 6 to 7. That's actually very reasonable. That's less than what I would have expected. I think that's interesting that all it takes. And I know that I've heard. And I mean, it sounds like you might have found this because like you've had a lot of success with player props that, sites don't pay attention to the player props as much as they do, with DFS. So you can get an edge in player props because they don't care about it as much, or they're not as, I'm trying to find a better word to weigh this. Would you agree with what I'm saying, that sites seem to be a little bit not as stingy on player props?
Yeah, they're softer lines and they don't get adjusted as quickly. Softer is kind of the term a lot of people use for these. They're soft lines. The games, the spreads, the totals, team totals, money lines, things like that. The sports books, they clean up on 2 things. Number 1, they clean up on parlays. Number 2, they clean up on games. On props, that's where very smart people who are very sharp and who are shopping around are able to be profitable. And in fact, on my my betting site on Sparry, I mean, we're plus 130 units this year. I would say 90% of all of our bets for our members are on player props only. We don't focus on parlays, which is where the books will clean up, and we don't focus on games very much. There are other places out there that will, but the margin of error for those things is just so difficult. So I think focusing on props where you have an opportunity where Saturday night, they'll post the Mike Evans prop at 53.5, and if you jump on it then because you have a firm belief that he's hitting the over, guess what? Sunday morning by 11:30, that prop might have moved up 3, 4, 5 yards, or maybe even be scrubbed off the book. So I think jumping on it early, if you have a firm belief in it, is important. And the lines just move slowly, and then when they do move, they move drastically. And luckily, you're able to beat the closing line value by getting the prop in early.
Yep, that makes sense. Before we wrap, we're just about to wrap up here, but I want to talk a little bit about, Team Rise or Fall, your DFS and Donuts. So if I'm someone who, wants to be in your Discord or on their site, like what exactly do you get, like when you subscribe to these sites that you use? Like what are the things that the biggest things that you provide? Like please sell us and the viewers and why they should be subscribing to you. Because I learned a lot here, and I'm already convinced, but there might be someone, sitting right on the edge of that fence, tilting one way or the other. So please, why should we be subscribing to you besides for your great looks and the glasses and everything like that?
This
and
guy buttering me up.
Absolutely. Please sell us.
Okay. So first off, that's very kind of you to allow me to have this opportunity to kind of throw a sales pitch out there. One of there are better, I don't want to act like I'm some supreme DFS player, because I'm not. There's so many better players out there than me. I think one thing that people have been drawn to me over the years for is I'm very focused on teaching people DFS. And maybe that's because I taught elementary school for 13 years. So I've kind of got this approach with DFS where I like to take the puzzle and I like to break it into pieces for people. And I think if you join our site, teamriseorfall.com, our goal is to help people learn how to build competitive lineups. It's actually our tagline. It's learn how to build competitive lineups. So we take the puzzle, we break it into pieces, and we teach you what each puzzle piece is. And we want you to have the knowledge on how to become a profitable player, a competitive player on your own. We don't want you to have to use our site. We just want you to stick around once you've learned because you enjoy our community, you enjoy the product. But my main goal is to help people learn how to play, is to teach them the ins and the outs, talk about the things a lot of sites won't talk about. I think a lot of people give great information out there, maybe even better projections, maybe even better picks than what we do. But what we focus on more so than any other site out there is the learning aspect and the teaching aspect. And, we have private streams and Discord every night, every week, where we're focusing on the how to and the why behind DFS and not just the picks itself. And while we do have the picks on the site and the projections and the models and and all that stuff, that ultimately knowing what to do with them, I think is equally or even more important than actually what those are. Because without some type of roadmap, what do you do with that stuff? So That's what we do. It's teaching and supporting people in becoming hopefully a competitive and profitable player.
Absolutely. And with that, I know you guys also give out the picks that other sites give out as well, in addition to the projections. But the edge is that you're teaching people how to learn how to build lineups, how to look for the leverage and different things beyond just, what should I pick on the site? How much does Mike Evans cost on FanDuel versus DraftKings? So it's more about how to learn, how to build lineups, what you're looking for. A lot of the stuff that we talked about today, that's not just the numbers of this site or that site. It's like, what lineups are you looking for? How are you going to become profitable? What to look for in each contest? Did I get that right?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people are pointing to Mike Evans in a great matchup on the weekend, right? And he's had 75 yards in 3 straight games, great matchup, 25th DVP, but whatever. There's all that stuff people are talking about, but what do you use Mike Evans in? What type of tournaments is he a good play for this weekend? And are you using him with Tom Brady? When you do, are you correlating it with somebody on the other side? That's what we focus on. We have stacking tools. We have, a core stacks page, player pools we give out, all sorts of strategy write-ups. We're really, really big on the strategy. And, honestly, I've built the site to be a product that I would want. I am somebody who yearns for information and for strategies and studying. And, I want it to be delivered in a way that's easy to comprehend. If we're giving you this information, this next level stuff that I deem next level, if it's not something that you can comprehend and it's not actionable information, then why would we give it away? So making sure it's easy to understand, making sure it's something you can, it's actionable information is important to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my final
appreciate that, man. That's so kind of you to give me the opportunity to say that stuff.
Absolutely. No problem at all. I mean, I'm interested, and I think people, again, they've heard a lot of stuff, and you gotta give you a little shot to convince them. But final 2 questions here. Number 1, and this is probably the most important question I have for you today. It's a long episode, and we've talked about a lot of different things. People are going to shut off this podcast and get back to mowing their lawn or dealing with a crying baby or, making lunch, whatever's going on. What are the biggest 3 or 5 takeaways that you have? We can sum this all up in 1 minute of the biggest 3 or 4 things that you need to take away from this podcast, whether you're doing player props, whether you're doing DFS, whatever it is. What are the biggest takeaways that people should have from listening to this podcast today?
I think first off, identify your goals, whatever it is.
Okay.
If this is going to be a side income thing, if you're trying to go professional, or if you're trying to just have fun and make it a hobby, what is your goal? And then go from there. And I think once you've identified what your goal is, the rest will start to fall in line. I think the next thing is be true to yourself. With that goal in mind, set up something that is achievable, something that you can reach, something that you can attain. You can't set a goal that is way up here when you're just starting out. Set an achievable goal so you can feel that success. Is your goal on the weekend to cash in a small tournament? Okay, then be happy when you do. Don't be upset that it didn't get more, that it didn't finish in the top 10%, the top 5%, So you achieved your goal. Okay, now what's your next goal? Well, now I want to try a larger tournament. All right, well, what's your goal there? Well, I'd like to be competitive and make sure I get my stack right. Cool. If that's your goal for the weekend, whether you cash or not, if you got your stack correct, awesome. Set goals that you can achieve, set goals that will get you to your final objective of, being a side income player or a full-time player, and whatever that is. I think that's honestly the 2 most important things that I could tell people to do is, be realistic with what your goal is. And then, just be responsible, stick to the roadmap and don't chase the milli maker if that's not your goal. So, because you're going to burn through your bankroll, man. I see it all the time.
Yep. No, that totally makes sense. That's great. That's great advice. And my final thing for you today, Mitch, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. So what do you want the listeners to know? You please, shameless plug, whatever you got, what do the listeners need to know? Where can they find you? What are all the stuff that you're doing and working on and all the great content that you're providing right now?
Appreciate it. There's 2 times you give me this opportunity. So you guys can find me on Twitter at DFSnDonuts. Reach out, say hello. I'd love to talk to you. You can shoot me a DM, whatever it is. If you're a sports bettor, I know a lot of people are here for fantasy sports and DFS. That's teamriserfall.com. If you're a sports bettor, I've got another site that has tools, models, cheat sheets. We give out betting slips, all sorts of things in our Discord as well. That's mysparry.com. So you guys can, go ahead down any of those paths. And honestly, my main thing that I dove into after I did the blogs and I did the podcasts and the videos, it was to build a community, build a Discord community. And my community is so important to me. Just as I've seen you grow yours on TikTok, grow yours on Twitter, you're crushing it, man. You might be the best out there at this stuff. Honestly, I think you're going to be absolutely massive, Alex. And you do such a good job because your community matters and people see that and people want to be a part of your community. And my community is what's more important to me, more so than the business, more so than my own personal growth. So I spend a lot of time in Discord, probably too much to the point where I don't grow as much as I should on these other platforms because I spend so much time in Discord. That's where I have fun. I have my needs met in life. I have a roof over my head. My family's taken care of. We're healthy, number 1, which all that matters. And from there, man, what am I going to do with my time, my energy, my investment of my personal life? And I'm going to build community. I'm going to have fun with people in Discord. I'm going to have fun with people on Twitter and socials. And I'm going to get the most I can out of life. And I'm going to do my best to be kind and to shine light out there on individuals through our interactions. that's important to me more so than anything else. So if you're not here trying to pick up information, buy a product or anything like that, just say hi to me on Twitter and I'd love to say hello back.
Absolutely. And I can attest to that as someone that before you knew who I was, and when I first learned you, like from the first time that we interacted and stuff, like and that's the thing I've seen in your Discord as someone who's in your Discord. Doesn't matter who you are. If you're on the fence about it, don't be afraid just because, someone knows more about DFS. People are really kind and they're building a great thing. So I really appreciate that, Mitch. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure. I learned a ton. I can't wait to listen back and take more notes and everything. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much. And for the listeners, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It's always great to talk ball with you and you talk ball with us and get to listen right along. So I appreciate you so much. And as always, please leave a review. You guys already know what to do. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.